Thanks everybody for coming.
We have some other special friends here to help us tell the story of what was going on here in the Twin Cities in the late 70s and early 80s. I'm going to bring up next Dez Dickerson. These are just a few of Dez's accomplishments. He's a music business professional with over 49 years of experience.
I was 2 when I started, so.
Including his role as the founder, president, and CEO of the Pavilion Group. He's worked as an artist manager, A&R exec, music publisher, artist, performer, songwriter, and record producer. And of course, his rich and extensive experience includes 5 years as the guitarist, the original guitarist, in Prince's live band. Dez Dickerson.
Man, all that made me tired.
And finally, here from Seattle, we have Kevin Cole. Kevin is currently the afternoon DJ at the legendary Seattle non-com station KEXP. Prior to moving to Seattle, though, Kevin was an influential fixture here in the scene, including being the longtime house DJ at First Avenue. He ran a taste-making record store called Hot Licks, and he launched the short-lived but eternally beloved alternative station Rev 105. Kevin Cole.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Andrea. Al, awesome.
Thanks for coming, man.
Love the book. The photos are incredible. And Dez, thank you for all the amazing music.
Oh, my pleasure.
What a cool group of guys, huh? I'm so excited to be here. So we are talking about specifically the late 70s, early 80s. This is the era depicted in the photo exhibit. And I would just love to hear a little bit more from each of you. What were you doing in the late 70s? Kind of set the scene of who you were in the Minneapolis scene in this era.
Well, I knew exactly who I was. I was a fashion photographer, and I first started at Donaldson's department store, and you'd have to be very old to remember that one. But then I moved on to Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, and Prince saw a photo I did for the YWCA, and it was a black and white photo of 2 black people, and it was beautiful, and he saw it, and he called me right away, and we did the star photo that's on the picture of my book. We did that was our first photo together.
Incredible. Dez, what about you? What were you doing in the late 70s?
I mean, I actually started playing in bands 10 years before. I was like a junior high school, like a 9th grader, and just got obsessed with playing guitar. Had a booking agent by the time I was 15, and my folks would write me, my mom's here, hey mom. My mom would write me notes to get out of school early.
Mom. Yeah, hi.
Hey, Mom. My mom would write me notes to get out of school early on Fridays so I could go play in East Crevice, Iowa or something. And so by the late 70s, I'd been kind of doing that for a while in the Midwest and, the whole thing. Crossed paths with bands, unknown bands like Cheap Trick and other bands kind of in their early stages. And then connected with Prince and started on that wild ride. And it was through that met Al.
Yeah.
And our first photo session that was a thing of wonder. I wonder how we ever, no.
Yeah, I wonder too, really, I do.
Was that a moment where the band sort of gelled more? Or, kind of came together as a group?
It was, because it started out like, people were being snatched off the street, like black bags being put over their heads and being thrown in a van, and now we're going to take a picture of all these people who don't fit together in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
But yeah, that was the beginning of it.
Very cool. Well, we'll get to more Prince stories very quickly because I know that's the big reason why we're here, but I do want to find out a little bit more about what, Kevin, you were up to in that era.
Great, and cut me off at any time, but in 78 I had finished college in that winter and spent the summer doing a Jack Kerouac on the road kind of hitchhiking deal, and part of my college is I just was a hardcore music lover from the moment I heard music, and So kind of ran the college radio station and had a degree in radio broadcasting that was an independent thing. And so moved to Minneapolis or back home and was working some crap jobs while trying to play music in some bands. And the jobs got so bad that I heard that they needed a DJ at Uncle Sam's. I had never been at Uncle Sam's prior to knocking on the back door and meeting Steve McClellan for an interview.
Steve's here. Hey, man.
And, I just want to do one quick shout out. We wouldn't be here tonight, or there wouldn't be a First Ave exhibit here to celebrate, which is amazing, without Steve McClellan.
That's right.
That's right. And it may be something we hit on later, but there were pivotal moments in the club's history, times when the club might have financially not happened, that Steve played a key role in convincing Alan Fingerhut to actually keep the club open and to finance it. And then, Steve had a real open mind about music, and we when he hired me, I have no idea why he hired me, but I was brought in part to usher in a change for the club that was kind of a college, suburban, Saturday Night Fever kind of disco. And the idea was, hey, disco's dying and something new's happening, and I was kind of a punk rock Ramones lover, and we didn't know what was going to happen next, but we knew something was going to happen next, and kind of intuitively we did that. But Steve was really just super supportive, and always we wanted to build a home for artists and a home for music lovers, and one that was really open-minded and tolerant, and really tried to accept, build community and create a space where I think the ethos was really similar to what Prince declared in Uptown. White, black, Puerto Rican, everybody just a freak, and that was sort of the vibe we were going for musically. So it was an eclectic mix of music that didn't hang its hat on any given genre, and therefore never succumb to the trends of any given genre. It's just about trying to play good music.
Alan, would you hang out at Uncle Sam's?
First Avenue, actually, and Steve McCullen, I gotta thank again. He gave me a black card where I could get in free. I saw you two there when there was only like 100 people in the audience, and like the next week was Boy George, and there was probably only 50 people there and then when those guys came back, they were in auditorium and stuff. So thank you, Steve, for that musical education. It was wonderful. Yeah, it was great.
I don't want to time hop too much because I do want to talk about all of you meeting Prince as well, but since we're on the topic of First Ave, let's go a little further down this road. I would love to hear a little bit from Dez about, the first time that Prince played there when it was still known as Sam's. That was early 1981. As someone that had already been so involved in the scene, what do you think that meant for Prince and the band to be in that room?
I think that in terms of Prince's sort of sense of it, it grew quickly. It grew over time because he hadn't played there prior. So the iterations of Uncle Sam's and all those things. I mean, I played there. I think I was 18 in Revolver when it was Uncle Sam's. So, but it felt like home immediately. And I think for Prince that was really important because it kind of became that place that we could always come back to. And it was like we'd driven that stake in the ground. And it was obviously an incredible, unique, energetic place that had already had this momentum of, as Al said, everybody played there just before they became huge. So it only made sense, right? But I'm just kidding. But that was, for me, that was kind of it.
Well, let's hear some Prince stories. I know that you all have some pretty incredible experiences meeting Prince, getting to know Prince. Let's start with, what's your first memory that comes to mind of meeting Prince and having him enter your life?
Well, meeting Prince, like when I heard him, it was on the Soft and Wet track, and he had a falsetto voice. And I didn't mean like he was going to come in and, you know, say hi Al in falsetto, but he had a really deep voice. You know, it was like, hi Al, how are you? You know, and so that kind of shocked me that when I first met him that, you know, he had such a deep voice and actually so small in stature and yeah. And it was interesting anyway. And then how I first got to meet him was, like I said, shooting that poster. And then he called me and then he came down. And actually when he was talking to me on the phone, he says, well, how much do you charge an hour? And I was just kind of spitballing. I didn't really know what to charge. And I said, how about $150 an hour? And he goes, okay, book me for 3 days. I went, cool. Can't go wrong with that. So yes, Dez can kind of pick it up from there, I think.
You know, my very first impression was, bro, you're 2.5 hours late. That was my first impression. I showed up to audition at this place called Dell's Tire Mart, and it was like cold. I don't think it was the dead of winter, but it was cold. And they were auditioning guitarists and keyboard players, and you know, we're all like sitting in our cars in the parking lot. So they kind of rolled, and it got to the point where let's all crowd in one car. So because we all are musicians with crap jobs who don't have money, we're not using all our gas. But when they got there, it was, I mean, the first impression, the height thing I think did kind of hit me. Because I was always like, oh, he's shorter than me, awesome. You know? Love finding people that were shorter than me. And then it was, he didn't say much, surprise, surprise. And just kind of came in, sat down behind a keyboard and just started playing. And then, you know, Bobby and Andrea just kind of fell in behind. So I thought, well, okay, I'll join this party too. And I just started playing rhythm. So really, literally within 10 minutes of meeting each other, the thing that sort of sealed the intro was just playing music together. Played for 15 minutes because I had to leave and go back to East Crevice, Iowa and play a show. So we came out in the parking lot, we had a short conversation. He asked some really, you know, very deep questions for a guy that was as young as he was. I think it was 20, maybe he just turned 20 at the time. And, you know, we made this deal in the parking lot. He knew that I had been doing this thing and fronting bands and whatever. And then I found out years later from Andre that really what it was the two of them had decided they wanted like a third frontman. They wanted to do this thing where there were like 3 guys that were all, you know. So he said, you know, would you be interested in just coming and helping me do what I'm doing? And then when the time comes, I'll help you go back out and do what you want to do. And by the way, he kept his word. So yeah, that was my first impression. Other than the late thing, that was like, you can laugh, because it's one of those things.
No,
my man could be
he
late.
would always make you wait.
How about you, Kevin?
You really see that 3-person frontman in the Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad video. For me, I was DJing at Uncle Sam's, I had the record store down the street, and Soft and Wet, For You was like, I was aware of the record, and you know, we didn't really play it a lot at that time. The second album had, you know, Why You Want to Treat Me So Bad, I Want to Be Your Lover, those were hits, so I was pretty hyper aware of Prince, and you know, there was the Orpheum show before the March 9th, 81 show. Dirty Mind was out, and you know, the record label was trying to move Prince kind of to a bigger audience, but the Orpheum just wasn't quite right? You couldn't dance in there, it was too big. So I first met him at the March show, 81, and was DJing, and being the DJ kind of could run around and do whatever, and it was one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. Like amazing. I knew I was seeing, you know, something remarkable and brilliant. And so I just ran backstage after the show, and in that show, Prince, by the time the show was over, he was wearing basically a G-string and leg warmers, pretty much nothing else. And he was sitting on a chair like this backstage. And I stood over him pretty hyper and excited, and was just like, oh my God, that was amazing, that was so good. And he just really quietly, but with a beautiful, warm smile, just said thank you. So that was the first time I met him, and that was the first dialogue we had, and that was it. It's just lucky that I was able to DJ some parties for him and have some more engaging conversations later. But it blew me away, right? Here's somebody that just, played one of the most extroverted shows I'd ever seen, and still to this date have ever seen. And then off stage was just a very, quiet and introverted and thoughtful.
In his underwear.
In his underwear.
That was quite the visual. Well, that's another thing I want to know about is, you all got a chance to get to know him at such a young, vulnerable part of his life. This was pre-1999, pre-Purple Rain. He hadn't been on MTV yet. He hadn't had fans chase him down the street yet, as I know Dez watched. What was he like at this time? Like, how would you describe him as an artist? How would you describe him as a person to be around?
No, he was always great to work with because he was very creative, and he was an artist anyway. And then I think he brought fashion into music and into his music. So, but I'd be the last person to call after he got his music done. He was just such a perfectionist about his music, and I know Dirty Mind he was just finishing Dirty Mind, and he calls me and he says, well, I gotta have this album to Warner Brothers by tomorrow. And I go, I don't know if I can even do that. I mean, this is back in the day with no internet, no cell phone. There was, no transferring big files over the internet. This is something you had to do by mail or some other means. So the next day was a little impossible, and then the idea for it was, he calls and says, well, the name of the album is Dirty Mind, and I want to be shot on a bed. So shooting a man on a bed, I was like going, well, okay, that could work. I mean, I could try to make that work. I mean, so I actually went to a junkyard and found just bed springs. And that's what's on the cover of Dirty Mind, bed springs. I did shoot him on a bed in the back of it at Kim's apartment. You remember Kim, I'm sure, right? So, yeah, I think they got thrown out for that. That spray paint he used, and yeah. Whoops. They didn't like that.
Well, I would love to hear more about kind of the working process of how you came up with that concept and how much of it was Prince's input and yours versus, how he was standing.
It was pretty much 50-50, I mean, at that time. Especially, when he first asked me to do an album for him for Warner Brothers, I pretty much dropped the phone. No way I'm ready for that. I was just starting out. I wasn't an established photographer. It wasn't, Richard Avedon, or not even close. And I was just kind of getting started and just getting equipment, and so, it was amazing that I captured that personality, and so no, it was fun. I mean, all the time working with him, it was fun. It was just the time crunches, and of course him being late to everything.
I told you.
It was always a surprise, like the Controversy cover we did at his house in Minnetonka because he didn't want to leave. At that point, he was getting phone calls, and he changed his number every day. Remember when he did that? And then, and he says to me on the Controversy cover, he goes, I want it to be shot on newspaper. And the only thing I could think of was a parakeet. And I know that's bad. But I go, how am I going to make that creative? Right? So I remember calling my brother, and my brother said, why don't you make it like the Controversy Daily? And I go, that'd be great, yeah. Can I do that in one day? He goes, well, yeah, I can get it made in one day. So he did, and the rest is kind of history. you know, oh, the part that I'm leaving out is that I had to call him back because after my brother gave me the idea of headlines, I was going, well, should it be names of songs or should it be, you know, let's let Prince decide. So I called him right back. And luckily, he had the same phone number.
What were the odds?
Yeah, you know, normally he wouldn't have the same phone number. So he started giving me these titles like Joni, because of Joni Mitchell, and Ronnie Talked to Russia, and all these kind of, I know they weren't titles of songs, but it must have been something he had in his mind at that time. And so we just made them up. I went out to his house and we photographed from probably 10 p.m. until 10 a.m. the next morning. You know how that worked, you know.
Well, I was explaining that one picture by the window with, you know, Fink with the stethoscope on the wall. That was after one of those, like the tail end of 12 hours of torture.
Right.
They did all sorts of crazy things at that point, so.
Yeah.
Kevin, you made such an interesting comment when we were over in the gallery that, you know, now these album covers, Dirty Mind and Controversy specifically, like we've been seeing them for over 3 decades now, and we're just kind of used to how they look, but when they came out, what a bold statement for an artist to make. I mean, what were your impressions when you first saw these albums?
Yeah, so Rolling Stone described Dirty Mind as the most radical 180-degree turn in pop music history, from the second album, the Blue Album, to Dirty Mind. And musically, it really was. I mean, it's such a transformation. You maybe had a little taste with Bambi, right? Of kind of what was to come. But so musically, it was a bold move. But visually it was too, and I know at the record store, Hot Lick sold either funk or punk new wave. We didn't really carry a lot of sort of mainstream records, and we would have the display of all the album covers behind the scene, or behind the counter, and people would come in and they'd see Dirty Mind, and you'd get one of two reactions: either, "Oh no! Oh no, Prince, what are you doing?" Kind of from fans. Or, you know, some of the new wave kids would be like, "Yes." But you wanted to hear that record when you saw the cover. And I always wondered, hell, like, I mean, it's a bold cover. Like, was there any fear? Did Prince ever, like, did he know what he wanted? Was there ever any concern that the record label was going to reject it?
No, because he had complete control. So whatever he gave them, they had to use, or he forced them to use it because, you know, he sent it to them so late.
That's a good strategy.
So, yeah, Dirty Mind was that was done pretty much in a day, and I was fortunate though to get it done, and he was really determined on black and white, and really determined on a look. Actually, I think I took one photo that had more of his personality in it, but he didn't like that. So he's kind of like that. He kind of like he was shy about himself as far as public and stuff.
It's really interesting though, because your photos, I think more than any other photographer's work, really captures sort of a vulnerability and a warmth, some playfulness, and also, I mean, I don't know, but the sense I get looking at them is sort of a more realness, like he opened up and let you shoot his real personality.
Well, I hope so. You know, I mean, working together, you know, and Dez can attest to this. Sometimes he'd look at you, you didn't know what he was thinking. You know, I mean, he could be really happy with you, or he could be mad at you, or
He could be watching old Popeye cartoons. And
yeah, right. You just didn't really know what he was really thinking about, and you're just kind of waiting for some kind of response, and like the first set of transparencies, that's what I call them, because they weren't digital back then. And the first star photos I did for him, I laid out on my light table, and he looked at it and he goes, "Man, these are really bad." And I went, "Oh my." My first big chance with Prince, and I'm going to lose it, you know. And he goes, "No, these are really bad, man." And he goes, "You know, But then I found out bad was good. So if they're bad, they're good. So, but that's, being from suburbia. I wasn't quite used to that slang yet.
Des, for you, looking at these images and, for someone that knew Prince so well in this era, worked so closely with him, what do you think they tell us about who Prince was in this time?
It's interesting because I think what you see now and some of what had gone on before that kind of informed all of it, but also the moments in which some of those things were born. For me, that's what's interesting, to kind of have that 360 view. Because, for example, I think I talked about this today, the whole bikini underwear thing. I was there the moment that was birthed, and here's how it happened. What had happened was, we were playing the Roxy in LA and it was like an evening where we did 2 shows with a break in between. It was the typical, you get the tastemakers and the kingmakers and you do showcases and they come out and act cool, but then they talk about it later. So the first show that night, he wore these almost gold, almost LeMay looking spandex pants. And our managers, who were amazing, music biz veterans, that managed everybody from the Love and Spoonful to Earth, Wind and Fire to Weather Report. I mean, these were legit guys. But they came back and one of them said, Prince, you can't do that. You have to wear underwear. You can't go on stage and not have underwear on. So they leave. So what do you think happened? So they said, okay, second show, I'm gonna wear underwear. And pretty much nothing else. So that was how that whole thing came about. And then I was actually with him when he first read the Rolling Stone review. And he had called me up, wanted to get together and talk because he was kind of down because the record company had pushed back on the record. You know how it would be. Like you said, it was too late for them to do anything. Right. But they thought they signed Smokey Robinson and they got, Johnny Rotten, and they didn't know what to do. So I was with him and we've been having this conversation and I'm kind of talking him off the ledge, But then he starts to look, and he had picked up his mail and brought it with him. So he decides to turn it and look at the review, and it's like this glow in the dark, like this guy walks on water and invented air. It was like this amazing, and everything changed. But that was the moment where he realized, you know what, I'm just gonna do what I do. Nothing can stop us. I'm just gonna do what I do. And he was affirmed, and obviously that review, that changed everything. Because once the critical boat turned, that was it.
It probably changed things with the label too, maybe. Maybe they trusted the vision more.
They did, although it took another record. There was another situation at the time of the Controversy record. I'm not going to go into that one. I better talk to my lawyer first. But there was one more kind of stare down that he won, and then after that, the success was undeniable. Folks stopped trying to tell him you need percussion on the record and you got to wear underwear. They stopped all that stuff.
Well, yeah, 1999, it actually just such a breakthrough album. And you worked a lot on that, didn't you? And it was such a breakthrough album. And I remember photographing him at the time, and he was really into movies, and he said, Al, make it look like Blade Runner. And I was going, okay, cool, I'll just rent Blade Runner. So I went to my local video store, and I said, can I get a copy of Blade Runner? And they said, no, it's not released yet. And so it wasn't in the theaters, it wasn't on video yet. So I just asked everybody I knew. I probably called Dez at 12 at night. Did you see Blade Runner? What did it look like? And pretty much everybody said, that's why you got the look you got in the photos in the museum for that album. We did Smoke and Neon, and that was it.
And now that album's being reissued.
Exactly.
Comes out this fall.
Yeah, it's like 30 new songs. Mm-hmm. I gotta be excited about that.
Mm-hmm. And live material from the 1999 tour.
And we were on that tour together, so yeah, we had a great time. Don't ever go to a party with Dez.
Okay, well back then. Back then, my whole thing was I would be the last person standing. So, or the last person like to be kicked out the door, one of the two.
Well, I know that you both spent some time on the road with Prince. So
Absolutely.
I want to hear some tour stories.
Oh, I don't know if we can talk about those, can we? I mean,
Again, I need to call the lawyer.
yeah, I need to call my lawyer.
There are a few.
Yeah, the time was definitely off the hook. If you got up on the time floor, yeah, that was X-rated down there. So, but Prince was a little bit more subdued. You know, I'd have a room right next to him, so he took care of me really well, especially on tour. And I think he took care of all of us pretty well. You know, I mean, Al took care of the band, and he took care of his personnel and even Tommy Marzullo, the production manager, all those people that worked setting up stages and setting up, the whole show. And I think he treated everybody really, really good. We were just nice to be in the inner circle then, and yeah, we can't say too much. And Dez, if you want to say more, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you're hitting it on the head in that the team had kind of come together, and there were certain people who ended up being sort of cornerstones of his whole sort of, production kind of approach with, like, Roy Bennett doing the lighting and that kind of thing. But, there would be certain things, because people would expect, they would see the image and think, there was this, like, bacchanalian, like, thing on wheels on the road. But really, he would have these parties. They'd do this thing where after the show, they'd set up in a hotel ballroom, and it'd be this beautiful, catered thing, and the bar, and we'd kind of come half hour, 45 minutes late. There's a late thing again. We'd walk in one door, kind of walk through, kind of stand for a minute, and then walk out another door. That was it. That was the party.
Right.
That was the party. And we got on the bus and we played Mattel and television to the next town. So there was that weird kind of dichotomy between what it looked like from the outside and what it actually was. But there were a lot of things that were interesting, that were sort of birthed in that era. The long sound checks, and
right.
the rewriting the show during sound check, and the watching the videotape on the bus after the show,
right.
Stuff that became part of who he was going forward. So.
Exactly.
And we had the screenwriters for the film on the bus with us.
Right.
Or the original screenwriter, I should say.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, have you guys ever seen the movie Almost Famous? It's kind of like that.
Yeah, except the whole thing being up on the garage saying I'm a golden god.
Yeah, that didn't happen.
Oh wait, or did Matt do that? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Matt could have.
I had heard about these sort of legendary post-show video sessions where he would want to watch the show in its entirety with the band after the show. Was this sort of a reflection of his kind of perfectionist tendencies, and was he critiquing the show and constantly working on it? How would he provide feedback to you and the band and stuff?
The interesting thing is that, yes, it became like a routine, almost to the point of being, in a good way, being obsessive. But I gotta say, I was the one that introduced him to the idea of videotaping the show, using it like a football team would use game film. And then later on, I kind of wish, we could like take a night off.
You just played the show.
But that's a huge part of how it became what it became, because he paid attention to every detail. He was kind of like the Bill Belichick of rock and roll, because he didn't miss anything. That's a football coach, by the way. Just saying. But yeah, it was a huge part of that. The work ethic combined with the perfectionism that made that whole live thing what it was.
Right. And he was so good live. You would kill it.
Well, he
every night.
became good live. But you remember the Capri though?
Oh yeah.
Who was at the Capri? Come on now. All right, I'm just
Do we know about the Capri Theater shows? In 1979, Prince's first shows as a solo artist. Dez was there. Didn't go as planned necessarily.
It was a baptism by fire. But that was the thing about him. he was going to, every single thing he did, he was going to use it as the stepping stone toward being great or greater. And he was like a sponge in the early days. He learned from everything and everybody. If he saw a good idea, he knew how to adapt it. He knew how to adopt it. And he was just that guy that he just, absorbed everything, and it fed into what he already was in terms of his creativity and his imagination. And, all of it kind of came together in a way that people thought he appeared on Mount Olympus clad in purple, but no, it kind of started out, we were like in a van or a rented station wagon. And,
Exactly. I remember going through North Minneapolis with you guys, and all those little girls were, I don't know if that was the Torchlight Parade night, or remember that? And, yeah. And the whole van was getting rocked by all these 12-year-old girls. And I was going, this is like the Beatles, This is like, I wasn't ready for this.
Neither were we.
Yeah, right.
Well, Kevin, I feel like you have such an interesting perspective to bring into this, because you two were, what did you call it, in the bubble, or in the Prince camp, firmly in the little circle of people that were really riding along on him as he started this journey. And Kevin, you had your fingers so deep in everything else that was going on here in Minnesota. So I want to know, how did Prince fit or not with everything else that was kind of bubbling up in that really exciting era of the early 80s?
Well, the second I saw him at the Sam show, which I think was sold out, Steve, right? Was phenomenal. I mean, it was one of the most exciting things I'd ever seen. It was I guess what we've come to know as sort of the Minneapolis sound. It was funk and rock and new wave fused together. Here was an artist that was incredibly bold, that was championing personal freedom, and an artist that could sing about sex and God and gender and race, sometimes in the same song. It was mind-blowing, and it was a full-on embrace right at that point in time for us and for us at the club. And I think we feel really fortunate that we were able to provide a kind of a platform, that Prince and the band, felt comfortable and felt at home with. And there were a bunch of Prince shows through that era where my take on it would be, there'd usually be a kind of an unannounced show right before a tour that was kind of a test drive of the material. And then there'd be the official show. At one point, those were not at First Avenue anymore. So, controversy in 1999, we're at the Met Center out in Bloomington. So there'd be, the real show, and then there'd be the after, First Avenue blowout, which was not anything like the show, So it was amazing that Prince and the band wanted to do that, felt connected to the First Avenue audience. And there was a lot going on. I mean, we were on a mission to create a space again for artists that were making original music. And that was the difference from Uncle Sam's. Uncle Sam's, was a disco. When they'd have a band, it would be a cover band. And when we were able to transition away from American events, because Uncle Sam's was a franchise, there were 10 of them around the country. And once they were out of the picture, and the club had its independence and could exert its own vision, it was really about creating a space that was kind of nothing else. There wasn't a model. We weren't patterning it after anything. It wasn't exclusively a live venue, and it wasn't exclusively a dance club. We did Friday, Saturday dance mixes, which were just all kinds of music, and that was really the bread and butter, paid the bills, and that's what enabled Steve to book and take chances, to have James Blood Ulmer play, or artists that we knew we weren't going to make any money on, but that provided value to building a strong, vibrant music community. And And then opening the entry was key because that then, you know, the Longhorn was kind of dying, and man, it's just so hard to think back to this period of time when literally bands couldn't play. There were very few places bands could play if they were playing original music. So on the rock side of things, there was the Longhorn for a couple of years. As that was kind of going through some weird management issues, that was about the time we were able to take what was the coat check room at Uncle Sam's and make it into this 200 capacity club for original bands. And you know, I'm biased, but I'll say that I think First Ave and 7th Street entry was critical in the role of developing the scene, because it created a space where bands could feel at home, they could play original music, they could connect with an audience. And in those early days, people just, you know, obviously people would go see the band they knew, but there were also a lot of people that would just go because they wanted to be with like-minded musical misfits, you know, and so they would, and because of that, they just developed a scene. And I think what First Ave or the entry did ultimately is create kind of hope and optimism for new bands, emerging bands that could see, and something to aspire to. They could see, like, hey, my friend's band has gigs, maybe my band can get them, you know? And played a role that created a space and helped develop a scene.
One thing I've always wondered about is, you know, I guess when I look at this history, because I wasn't there, because I was a baby.
Ouch.
Sorry. It's not because I had somewhere better to
I need a
be.
gin and tonic now.
I always see almost these like two separate histories being told. There's like the kind of white punk rock scene that's been chronicled in Sid Collins' book, Complicated Fun, and you know, we talk about all these punk bands that came out of here and had this national presence, like The Replacements and Husker Du in the suburbs, and then I hear Prince being this kind of like other story. Was there overlap between these two scenes? Like, was Prince ever hanging out at a Replacement show? Were the suburbs ever scoping out Prince? Like, paint a little bit of a picture for me of that kind of vibe.
I will say, I don't know, I mean, Prince was into seeing live music, and he loved all sorts of rock bands. I mean, because I remember, you know, turning him on to like Generation X and the Sex Pistols, and he loved punk. He loved all things British. He loved, you know, classics nouveau, like the New Romantic thing, that whole deal. But I remember, like, you know, guys in those other bands, Suburbs and you know, Husker Du and Suicide Commandos, and you know, there was camaraderie. I mean, we weren't going to necessarily play on the same bill. I would have been cool with it, right, Pat? but there was, you know, and to this day, I mean, I'll run into some of those cats now, and there's still the camaraderie thing, because this was our hometown. And, you know, we were all doing what we dreamed of doing, and it didn't matter that, you know, there might have been different chord progressions and, you know, different rhythms, but it was cool. I loved the camaraderie of it.
Well, we want to have some time to take questions from you. So I think, I don't actually know where the microphone is going to be. There is no microphone. I have a microphone. Okay.
You can yell loud and just repeat their question so everybody can hear it.
Okay. What we'll start doing, and until if we find something better, we'll do that. But you can say your question, and then I'll repeat it into the microphone so we can all hear it.
Kevin, if you'd like a copy of the very first Club Degenerate video that you made back in, what year would that be?
84. Wait, you have a copy? You have
What
video?
is this, Kevin?
This is.
That's the very first Club Degenerate video that you ever made. I thought you might appreciate that.
No, this is fantastic. Club Degenerate was a night at First Avenue. Roxy Music's on here, Brian Ferry, Iggy Pop, Patti Smith, some local stuff. Oh, absolutely. So one thing about First Ave that was interesting is, you know, we were early on with exploring with video. So that's a 3/4-inch videotape, and that's what we would play in the club. And I mean, it was super cool. You'd be playing dance music and these giant screens, and suddenly, you know, Dez would be up there, like, you know, the 30-foot version of Dez and the song 1999. You know, it was like it was cool. It was exciting. It created a deeper, richer musical experience. Thank you. This is super cool. I can't wait to check it out.
And I will say this, I mean, to your point, as we traveled around the country, really around the world, there was no other club like First Ave. I mean, that's not just like a thing that you said, but that really was true. And there were some, you know, some great venues and some great rooms, but nothing like First Avenue, period.
That's true. First Avenue was a single club. I mean, you know, it's just one of those things that happened to be, you know, and we happen to be from here, so cool. So Steve, thanks for making a club like that. Yeah, Steve.
We're going to try to use the mic because this space swallows sound. So I'm going to give it to you, and then I'm going to run it back to Andrea, and then I'll run it back out again.
Dez, did you deal with Prince when he was living in Edina? I met you somewhere, but I can't remember where. I think at one of the practices, something like that.
Could be.
We'll talk,
Very well be.
we'll talk afterwards.
Yeah.
Saw your hand.
Speaking of suburbs, I'm really curious, Des, why Prince chose to live in Chanhassen. Can you shed any light on that?
Wow. I really don't know, because at first he lived, you know, west on whatever lake that
He
was.
lived on Lake Minnetonka for a little while, or near it.
But it was in the chain of lakes over there.
Right.
The house where I walked through the screening door because I didn't see it.
Right.
Long story.
Then there was the Purple House, and then the Chanhassen House. So there's like three that I know of.
And I don't know if that was like a realtor thing. It's like, oh, there's a nice part. And he just fell in love with the place, you know?
Right.
But who knows?
I know
I love that
Lorraine.
he stayed here, or always had a presence here. I know we all love that.
And he was committed to it. He'd say it all the time, that he wasn't going anywhere.
I know Lorraine has a question. Lorraine's the only person I've hung out with at both Paisley Park and the Judy Garland Museum.
Yeah, I get everywhere. What can I say?
Quick question. The photo of him wearing the bandana with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, what was the inspiration for that? Because that's a
Well, there was no inspiration for that. I was testing out some 4x5 film, and he walked in to look at some things that we shot the night before. And I said, you know, it's always good to have a flesh tone. Would you mind standing in? And he goes, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So he puts the bandana on and puts a cigarette in his mouth. It's actually my cigarette, but he never lit it or anything. He didn't smoke. And I was the only bad guy that did that. And I think Lisa, but that's it. And that's how we shot that photograph. It was just him fooling around in my studio. I mean, for no reason. He was just looking at some other stuff, and I was testing out some film, and he says, well, you want me to pose for you? And I said, sure. And then he did that exactly.
So it wasn't a Prince session.
No, not at all. He just happened to be there.
It's a great photograph.
Thank you.
What was the inspiration for Purple Rain? I don't recall a lot of artists at that time transitioning to make a movie, either concentrate on music or live performances. How did the movie come about?
You know, he was, as Al mentioned earlier, really a huge fan of film, and he loved like sort of music business or music themed movies. Two of them were The Idolmaker, and the other one was Quadrophenia, even though I don't know that it wasn't about the music, but the vibe impacted it. Right. You know what I mean? So I think that the idea of making a movie was just part of his, his game plan for world domination. And he talked about the movie thing for several years before it actually happened.
Oh yeah, we were on tour, I think with Dirty Mind, he brought that up, and at first the managers were going, what are you talking about?
We need a single, come on.
Yeah, we need a single, not a movie. And, but yeah, and then he actually asked me to be the cinematographer. And I said, Prince, there's a real big difference between me shooting still photos and like doing like movie stuff. I mean, you'd have to send me to school, or, I'd have to take a few courses. And he goes, oh, okay. And I think that was just forget it, so.
So it sounds like Prince was pretty open in sharing ideas, what he was thinking.
Yeah, and in the beginning, he was very collaborative. He wasn't dictatorial. He would ask your opinion because he really wanted to know.
Absolutely.
And if there was something that you were doing or saying that he was intrigued by, he would ask you that. I remember him I had this notebook that I wrote lyrics in when we were in Boulder doing the Rebels thing. And I remember him saying, hey, could I take a look at that? Because he was really curious about, we just had very different approaches to lyric writing. And he was genuinely interested in kind of getting that glimpse. And interestingly, years later, when it came to collaborating on some of the Time stuff, the thing he asked me to do was write lyrics. So he was very open. And, over time, you kind of find your wheelhouse and you got your secret sauce and you don't need anybody in your kitchen. But in the beginning, man, he was
in the beginning it was very collaborative with me, and I know with you. And I mean, you won't believe the Dirty Mind stuff that Dez did. He's such a great guitar player. He's just so underrated. Prince was a great guitar player. He was great at everything. But once Dez picked up the guitar and started playing, Prince would just throw the guitar over the back and sing. Because he was that good of a guitar player. And he still is. So, yes.
Thank you, Al. You can pass that stuff, man.
Other questions? All right. I'm going to go the closer one first.
Yes, I was just wondering, what's the inspiration behind Little Red Corvette and how did that come about?
The song, the track itself, I'm not sure. It was one of those things that, again, what he would do is call me up and ask me to come over and, sing a verse or play a solo. So he had the track pretty much finished when he had me come over to the house, when he, at that point, had, the full-blown studio in the basement. And I listened to the track, and he would always ask what you thought about it. And he really wanted to know. But at the same time, you could tell that it would be like cruel to be anything except really supportive. But if you weren't crazy about it, he'd listen to that too, and that was kind of the nature of our relationship as well. No, man, I don't like that at all, But anyway, he put the track up, and I said, man, I think this is huge. And I laid down like 5 solos, 5 different versions, and we just kind of went through, listened, and then comped together a single solo from those 5 passes. And, the solo itself ended up being something that I never would have played if I was just going to sit down and play. In fact, there were parts of it that it would have been impossible to put that interval after that interval. It just wouldn't have made sense at all. So my impression of how the song came together, he had an inspiration. By that time, he really knew how to take his thing, whatever we want to call it, Minneapolis sound, but make it so irresistibly pop that you couldn't see the seam. It wasn't like you sewed 2 things together. And that song, to me, was the epitome of that. And then, of course, the guitar solo. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I think that guitar solo was one of the greatest guitar solos.
It was named number 64 of the top 100 solos. So we jokingly say, oh, that's number 64, That's me. I was going to get a tattoo, number 64.
Did you have to then, once it was comped together, piece together, sort of learn how to play something that was not something you intuitively would have played?
Oh, I had to completely relearn it because parts of it, it's unnatural the way they fit together, at least in terms of how I would usually play. But I had to learn it note for note because I was not going to go and then like not play it. And to this day, just doing some reunion shows and different things, if I miss anything on that solo, there's this audible "oh" in the audience. I mean, it's like so deflating and sad. Okay, I missed the note, all right. It's been a while.
We have a question back here.
Big fan, Dez.
Thank you.
What kind of gear did you guys use while recording?
In the studio, it was kind of what was in his place, and he had this Mesa Boogie that he loved, and we had these Marshall cabinets that we mixed and matched. And I think the main rig that I used in his studio was that, but he plugged direct a lot for the rhythm guitar stuff, because that was just that sound that he loved. But it was funny because he wasn't really like a real gearhead, you know what I mean? He wasn't one of those guys that had just all these millions of dollars worth of, rare audiophile gear. It was kind of an odd collection of stuff. And it was real idiosyncratic, It was like there were certain pieces of gear that he loved were kind of like, why does he have one of those? But it was just, that was just his thing. That's what he did. So, vocal microphone that was amazing. That was the only thing. It was a U47, I think, only one he would use. But yeah, it was cool. Very, if Grandma's house was a studio, it would have been Prince's studio. You know what I mean? What's that, Grandma? Oh,
Yes?
Thanks. Alan, fantastic photographs. Thank you. It's kind of similar question. What sort of gear did you use for photographing? And also, what have you done since then to archive the material? Because you shot on traditional film that can degrade.
Yeah, I did shoot original film. That's what's kind of missing today is digital. My friend Stephanie over here from the UK took a photograph of my tie. I couldn't take a live picture of her at all. She looked amazing. I mean, she put me to shame. I had 80 pounds of equipment, flashes, and was lugging that around from, date to date on every tour. But in the studio, I was pretty much a studio cat. I mean, I'd use a Hasselblad all the time in the studio, and I had strobes, always use strobes. And it was back then, it was before the internet, before cell phones, before digital. And so everything was film. And how do you archive that? You try to hang on to as much as you can, and then you got to clean it a lot later. So that's the way it kind of got to the Minnesota Historical Society. They had to do a lot of cleaning, especially on the tour stuff, because that went through a lot of states of, being here and being there. And then if like magazines would call me to, share a photograph of Prince live or whatever, I'd take that one negative and print and then send them a print, but sometimes I'd forget to put the negative back, and I know that sounds bad to everybody, but when you got thousands of photographs of Prince, I lost a couple here and there, so that's how it was done.
Did you ever find a roll of film you haven't developed?
No, they were all developed. No, he'd make me go out. What we do is these guys would play until they could at the venue, and then they would do these after parties, and then I'd have to go to sleep. I'd have to set the alarm and look through Yellow Pages, because again we didn't have any internet, and the people with the biggest processing ad, that's who I'd go to. So I'd get a cab in the morning at 8 o'clock, get all my film processed, and then have them make contact sheets, and I'd have to show Prince at noon every day. So I was working every day, really hard. I think by Purple Rain, he took it a lot easier. I wish I would have been on that tour. But yeah, he made me work pretty hard.
Did Prince ever take a bad photo?
I haven't seen one. To tell you the truth, I really haven't. Have you? I mean, I haven't.
I just remember one that he hated, but it wasn't a bad photo. But actually, the cover of the Prince album, the second album, he just hated that photo.
Oh yeah, that one.
He hated that photo.
Yeah, he was calling that art, and I go, boy, give me the chance. I'll show you some art, but yeah, the second album, that bluish green one. You had a name for that though, didn't you?
Well, we called it the Sabu picture. You remember that, Pat? Because no, he looked like there was an old movie character. There was like this Sabu the elephant boy or something like that. So we just mercilessly ripped on that. Plus there was the Pegasus thing on the back. So it was like, dude, come on. But that was just us. We were like siblings that just, we could pick on each other, but we weren't serious.
But that was a great album. That really was.
Awesome.
Awesome album.
Give you a little information about the Little Red Corvette. The Little Red Corvette was a girl that Prince dated named Sue Ling. She has a book coming out, which will be coming out sometime before the year's over with.
All right.
Hold my calls, please.
So Dez, I was just wondering how Prince handled, did you say I quit, or did he? I don't want to bring up any bad memories or nothing like that, but
No, it conjured up the scene in that thing you do. I quit. I quit. It wasn't that, but I should have done it. No, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the very first time we met when I auditioned for the band, we cut a deal. And it was, I will do whatever I need to do to be, his wingman, armor bearer, to be the guy, to be Keith to his Mick and get where he was trying to get to. But when the time came, I was going to go back out and do what I'd always done. Because by the time I joined the band, I'd been fronting rock bands for 10 years. And the first thing he asked me was if you could do whatever you wanted to do, what would it be? And I said, well, it would be what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Singing and playing and writing songs in front of the band. So at the end of the 1999 tour, when we'd been talking about the film, like we said, for like 2 years, the screenwriter was on the bus writing the script. We knew there was going to be dance lessons and acting lessons and all this stuff. He actually called me back. I was out in LA in label meeting because I was about to sign a solo deal myself. He asked me to come back to Minneapolis. We sat down and he laid out the plan for not just the film, but what was going to happen for the next 3 years. We're going to do this film, we're going to do the record, we're going to release the record, and we're going to tour for 2 years. So there was a year in production and then 2 years on the road. So he said, I need you to either re-up and commit for a solid 3 more years, or if you want to go do your thing now, management is ready, Cavallo Ruffalo is ready to just, step in and do the thing. And in that moment, I was tired. I was just so tired. And honestly, I didn't like being around me by that time because I was just cranky and unhappy. So it was like 3 years, dude, I can't, 3 weeks right now. Seems like, and it wasn't like an animosity thing. It was just time. And I think people look at it from the outside and think, well, but how could you walk away from that? When it's time, it doesn't matter. But why did Barry Sanders quit when he did? Because when it's time, it doesn't matter. So it was totally amicable. I mean, he gave me the keys to the studio. I did a lot of demo stuff, Modern Air. Everything was done at his place. He came to a lot of the early shows. Totally supportive. So it was all very, very cool. And I TP'd his house, but no, I'm just kidding. it was all amicable.
We have one here.
Sure. Kevin Cole, My name is Tommy. I owe you a debt of gratitude. I was a waiter at the Nankin restaurant. You were my first table for lunch and told me Prince was doing the controversy gig at Uncle Sam's. I was front row with my whole crew from the Nankin restaurant, and I got to photograph him 8 other times. I owe you a debt of gratitude. I can never repay you. Thank you for all my Purple Life. And I still say it's one of the greatest shows he ever did of the night I saw. If you guys have any recollections of that night, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you. That's what music lovers do. We share music we love and hope others love it as much. And thank you. Those First Ave shows were remarkable, really special, magical shows.
Oh yeah, and I was in the audience like sweating like crazy. I remember coming out of the audience like I just got out of the swimming pool. I was working that hard. But thanks, Andrea, for doing all this.
Yeah. Should we take one more question? What do you think?
Sure.
Absolutely. As long as it's not about geography or where they
Oh boy,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is gonna be
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Okay, Steve.
Oh, you didn't want me to ask a question. Okay, since we're focusing on the Prince thing, Kevin touched on something a little bit earlier about the diversity of music that was happening during that time. And if Kevin was outside the bubble, I was outside the bubble on the other side of the street. Usually I'm in the office. The diversity, something I learned about Prince, I learned as much about Prince for the shows that he used to come in and see. When he didn't perform, just all of a sudden he would show up. From the Dead Milkmen in the entry to Jaw Wobble in the main room, although he did perform that night. But it was a whole, I learned more about the guy just for the shows. That was always in the early days, before Purple Rain days, which is what this exhibit is exciting to me. Because after Purple Rain, it just didn't happen as much anymore. And I'm wondering if I, just from the outside, did not see that happening, or if you guys on the inside of the bubble, or closer to the bubble, noticed that transition that occurred after Purple Rain. Because it seemed in the late 70s, early 80s, his visits to the club, you never knew what show he would show up for, which kind of gave us a little bit of credibility for the type of shows we were booking, because we wouldn't bring in diverse audiences and the musicians that would show up. And I don't know if that was felt on the inside of the bubble as much as it would to us that were on the other side of the street.
It definitely was, and I was talking about this earlier today as well. There was a point where, I mean, post-Purple Rain, he almost became the prisoner of his own fame. He, you know, I used to get these calls, I mean, from day one all the way through to like 3 weeks before he passed. You know, you answer the phone, Dez, Prince. Yeah, I recognize the voice, okay. But, you know, he called up after I left the band and after I toured with Billy Idol and like come home already. And he called and said, hey, you know, we're gonna send you a couple tickets, we're gonna bring you to DC. I want you to see the new show. And again, I want your opinion. And he was honest, he wanted my opinion. So, you know, he flew us out, we spent a couple days, 2 nights in a row, I think we saw the show. He had a day off after the second show. So, you know, we hung out, and by then he's got the grand piano is you know, in every hotel suite that he's in. You know, the private chef is traveling with him. And we had a great time, you know, talking about, yeah, dude, you start talking about all the old times. And at the end, you know, we're leaving, and I'm like, oh, you know, we're going to Georgetown tomorrow, man. You know how we used to love just kicking it in Georgetown and going to the shops, and his face lit up. And then all of a sudden, it just fell. It just fell, and he was silent for a second, and he said, man, I can't do that stuff anymore. So yeah, it changed. It changed. Purple Rain changed everything with respect to his life and how he could live it. So going to shows, everything became really difficult. Just hanging out became difficult. And that was a big part of who we were in the early days, was just hanging out. We'd go to like video arcades on days off the first couple tours. and blow our per diem playing Galaxian. You know I'm right.
Prince and I would play Centipede till like 4 in the morning.
Yeah, that was exactly it. So he couldn't be who he was anymore.
Well, thank you all for listening so intently and for being here, and thank you to these wonderful guests.
Hey, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks Steve, Kevin Ray.
Kevin Cole, Dez Dickerson, and big congrats to Alan Beaulieu.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, a little rough start, but just in the first couple minutes, but it went great.
Oh, good.
It went great. Sorry. Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Excuse me.
Feel free.